Hello, my name is Welcome to the Bear of Bad News. I'm your host, Lore Bear, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news, so I won't. This is your recap of positive news stories from around the world. Articles included in this broadcast were originally published from March 29th to 31st, 2026. That's right, we are moving to shorter than 1 week per episode. This new format will allow us to do two things. First, we can move to twice a week for episodes, which I think will be a nice addition, as I have found a lot of articles that were missed and more per week now as I find better resources. Second, I'm going to start a segment called Wheel of Happiness, where we add more articles from the missed pile to give additional content for episodes and make sure all the stories we find are included if possible. The stories in this episode are sourced from various news outlets and publications. The Bear of Bad News does not conduct independent fact-checking or verification of these stories. Listeners are encouraged to review original sources for accuracy and complete context. We are not responsible for the accuracy or content of third-party reporting, which is a fancy way of saying, I read it, I didn't report it. And here are this week's stories. First up, Denver nonprofit's new campus helps homeless youth exit crisis 3 times faster, independent data shows. From 9news.com, a Denver nonprofit serving homeless youth is releasing independent data showing its new integrated campus has enabled young people to reach stable housing 3 times faster than historical averages at a fraction of the cost of other public interventions. Urban Peak, the only nonprofit in Denver providing a full convergence of services for youth experiencing homelessness, opened the mothership in August 2024. The 4-story, 136-bed facility was designed to consolidate emergency shelter, transitional housing, medical and behavioral health care, education, employment support, and creative therapeutic spaces under one roof. An independent evaluation by data firm QREM, released March 19th, confirms the model is dramatically outperforming the organization's previous approach. Youth are moving to positive, permanent outcomes 3 times faster than they were before the mothership, Urban Peak CEO Christina Carlson said. The average amount of time that people are spending to get those positive outcomes is 30 days. The QREM report, titled The Mothership, Speeding Up the Path to Housing and Stability, analyzed data from 2,589 individuals who worked with Urban Peak between January 1st, 2017 and June 30th, 2025. Among its key findings, young people's basic needs, including safety, food, and hygiene, are being met 4 times faster than before the campus opened, dropping from 4 months to 1 month. Engagement with education, employment, and permanent housing services is occurring 47% faster than in the years before the mothership's opening. For the organization's most valuable clients, those considered hardest to serve, the transformation is even more. Before the mothership, those youth took approximately 1,400 days to reach a positive permanent outcome. That figure has since dropped to 262 days. No one can say that that's just extraordinary, Carlson said, and we are finding that we are moving people so much faster. The data also reveals a compelling financial case. Urban Peak spends approximately $7,000 per unduplicated youth per year, a figure Carlson says stands in sharp contrast to the cost of inaction. A chronically homeless adult costs on average somewhere between $30,000 and $50,000, she said. A youth in the juvenile justice system costs $100,000 or more a year. The cost per unduplicated youth at the mothership in fiscal year 2025 was listed at $7,812 in the organization's web release. Carlson said when QREM first presented the data, she questioned it. When we got the numbers, I couldn't believe it, she said. We don't want to say something that's not true. Is this really happening this fast? Are we really being able to do this? We have gone back and checked and checked and checked. Urban Peak, founded more than 35 years ago as a grassroots response to youth homelessness, serves approximately 1,000 unduplicated clients per year and provides street outreach and supportive housing. The campus now serves youth aged 12 to 24, an expanded range from the previous 15 to 21-year-old window, though Carlson said demand continues to outpace capacity. We have had a wait list coming into Mary's place since the day we opened, she said, referring to the campus's emergency shelter section. The mothership was developed in partnership with Shopworks Architecture and researchers from the University of Denver's Center for Housing and Homelessness Research. The design is rooted in the premise that the build environment functions as a first responder in recovery. Homelessness is a complex issue, said Chad Holtzinger, architect and president of Shopworks Architecture. It's about so much more than getting people off the streets and into a shelter. The real question we should be asking is, how much can we create an ecosystem that helps youth experiencing homelessness build self-determined, fulfilled lives? The campus offers tiered housing progression. Youth begin in Mary's Place Emergency Shelter. Then they can advance to the facility's neighborhood floors where residents take on greater responsibility, cook their own meals, and work towards full-time employment or school enrollment. Chris Golden, a current Urban Peak youth client, said he first found the organization online while staying with his mother. He described being frightened when he arrived. When I first got here, I was pretty scared, I didn't know how it was going to be, Golden said. Staying with his mother, confusion. He described progressing quickly, moving from day services to a shelter bed within 2 weeks and eventually participating in Urban Peak's Youth Master Cohort, a leadership program. Urban Peak has been one of the biggest straight shots for my career and everything that I'm trying to get through, Golden said. Am I glad with how everything's turning out, where I am at in life today? Oh yeah, I do it 1,000 times over and over just to be able to relive these moments. Carlson said the organization hopes the mothership's model extends well beyond Denver. What I hope is that not only in Denver or in Colorado, but across the nation, people really look at this as a model that can solve youth homelessness, Carlson said, because I believe that is possible. An estimated 4.2 million youth experience homelessness annually in the United States, according to figures cited in Urban Peak's release. Half of all chronically homeless adults first experience homelessness before age 25, the organization noted, citing published research. Carlson said that the developmental window makes the speed of intervention critical. Extended periods of homelessness for youth cause compounding issues, including setbacks in brain development, education, medical and mental health care, and increased risk of trauma, human trafficking, and substance misuse, Carlson said. Long stints of homelessness cause irrevocable harm. The full QREM report is available at urbanpeak.org. Up next, from homeless teen to law school grad, Zarina Sementelli returns to shelter that saved her. A fresh coating of snow has frosted the old brick mansion like gingerbread as a car pulls into the parking lot. A young woman with an inviting smile steps out. Hi, she says, stepping onto the sugary snow. Life was not so sweet when Zarina Sementelli arrived here the first time. Sometimes things can be so far removed that when you come back, you're like, wow, this really happened? Zarina says reflectively, I really did make it from here. Then, the 26-year-old newly minted lawyer walks into the Salvation Army's Booth Brown House, a shelter for homeless youth, and Zarina's former home. Inside, she walks down familiar hallways and staircases. She remembers studying for her ACT in one room. This is where we did our laundry, Zarina recalls as she enters another. But to fully understand Zarina's journey, we need to go back much farther to a father mostly absent and a mother with her own challenges. She has severe mental health issues, so she didn't work, Zarina says. Zarina remembers moving every year and constantly changing schools. We got evicted from our house when I was 15, she says. When Zarina's mom announced plans to move with Zarina and her siblings to Seattle, the teen broke away. I knew she didn't have a job or a place to live, so I knew they were going to be moving there to live in a shelter. School was the one place Zarina found stability, so she stayed behind, couch surfing at the homes of her Como Park High School basketball coaches and teammates until the unsettled seas of homelessness carried Zarina to Booth Brown House. This was really the first place that I felt like home, Zarina says. At 15, she moved into the small room in which she would live the next 2.5 years, a room she's now re-entering for the first time since she left. Sparsely appointed, the room contains a bed, a small counter, a sink, a stove, and a refrigerator. When you go from living on someone else's couch, Zarina says, I cannot articulate how important this space was for me. During the day, Zarina would take city buses or the light rail between school, her job, and grocery shopping for herself. At night, back in her room, she'd hit the books, which, it turned out, would pay off handsomely. I remember being right here opening up my Spellman acceptance letter and just feeling so blessed, Zarina says. After completing high school, Zarina was off to Spelman College, a historically black women's college in Georgia. She'd graduate debt-free. I applied for hundreds of scholarships, Zarina said. The Dell Foundation alone awarded Zarina a $20,000 scholarship. The Horatio Alger Association awarded her $10,000 more. Now, Zarina is back where she started, shaking hands with Caden Waxlicks, the current occupant of her old room. What makes me emotional, Zarina tells Caden in a trembling voice, is to see you as a young person just trying to make a way. She asks the 18-year-old if she can give him a hug. Girl, the story was sad enough, all right? Why are you asking for the hug? You. It's really important for you to believe in yourself, Zarina tells Caden as the two embrace. Believing in herself, Zarina wasn't done after graduating from Spelman. She attended California Western School of Law, graduating last spring, and then, a few months later, passing the bar exam on her first try. Up next, Maradona's former home is transformed into a soup kitchen in Argentina. From Reuters.com, every week, hundreds of people line up to fill a plastic container with food in an unlikely place, the humble home where Argentine soccer legend Diego Armando Maradona was born. The house in Villa Fiorito, a poor neighborhood on the outskirts of Buenos Aires, no longer belongs to the family of Maradona, who died in 2020 after a heart attack. But for the last month, its current owner has lent its dirt yard to a group of volunteers who light a grill and cook for neighbors. Last Thursday, Maria Torres stirred a stew in 2 large pots while several others peeled potatoes and chopped pieces of chicken. A mural painted on the house's facade depicts the soccer player next to the words, "The House of God." Poverty has been trending downward in Argentina, with official statistics released on Tuesday showing it dropped to 28.2% of the country's population in the second half of 2025, from 52.9% in the first half of 2024, when President Javier Milei sharply devalued the peso and inflation spiked. While there has been a very important drop in poverty, Argentina needs to see more GDP growth in labor-intensive sectors such as mining, as opposed to capital-intensive sectors such as agriculture, said Eduardo Donza, a sociologist at the Catholic University of Argentina. The drop in poverty rate has followed a substantial drop in monthly inflation from double digits when Milei took office to 2.9% in February. However, Malay's austerity measures have sharply diminished the public sector workforce, and many say they have lost purchasing power as the government has cut transportation and energy subsidies. Leonardo Fabian Alvarez, a pastor who runs the makeshift soup kitchen, said he has seen the demand for Leonardo Fabian Alvarez, a pastor who runs the makeshift soup kitchen, said he has seen the demand for food in Villa Fiorito and other neighborhoods grow as small factories have closed. Deregulation and a stronger peso have led to cheaper imports under Milei. People obviously lost their jobs, he said, adding that they come to the line, pick up food, take what we give them. Argentina declared the home of Maradona a National Historic Site in 2021. Up next, from Reuters.com, Canada aims to double the size of lands and water that are protected from development by 2030 as part of a new $3.8 billion nature strategy, Prime Minister Mark Carney told reporters on Tuesday. Ottawa will fund up to 14 new marine protected areas and conserved areas and at least 10 new national parks and freshwater national marine conservation areas. It would also fund up to 10 new national marine conservation areas and 15 national urban parks. This will protect at least 1.6 million square kilometers or 620,000 square miles of lands and up to 700,000 square kilometers of oceans over the next 4 years. It will increase terrestrial conservation from 14% to 30% by 2030 and marine conservation from over 15% to 28% on the way to 30% by 2030. Canada is home to 20% of the world's total freshwater, 30% of the lakes, 25% of the wetlands, and 24% of the boreal forests. It also has the world's longest coastline. Ah, nice little short one about Canada, where I'm from. Up next, scientists achieve impossible solar efficiency in renewables breakthrough. From independent.co.uk, researchers in Japan have developed a new material that allows solar cells to generate an amount of energy from sunlight that was previously thought impossible. The discovery made by a team at Kyushu University involves a special spin-flip emitter that can harvest energy from the sun that is typically lost as heat. The breakthrough overcomes the long-standing limit of conventional solar cells to achieve an energy conversion efficiency of 130%, opening up new possibilities for ultra-efficient solar panels. With conventional solar cells, a single particle of light, called a photon, can generate one energy carrier, known as an exciton. Until now, solar cell technology has only been able to harvest energy from about 1/3 of the available sunlight due to higher energy photons, like blue light, being lost as heat. The researchers used a process called singlet fission to split the excitons from higher energy photons into two lower energy excitons, theoretically doubling the energy. We have two main strategies to break through this limit, said Yoichi Sasaki, associate professor at Kyushu University's Faculty of Engineering. One is to convert lower energy infrared photons to higher energy visible photons. The other is to use singlet fission to generate two excitons from a single exciton photon. The research was published in the Journal of the American Chemical Society in a study titled Exploring Spin-State Selective Harvesting Pathways from Singlet Fission Dimmers to a Near-Infrared Emissive Spin-Flip Emitter. Say that 10 times fast. The discovery is the latest in a string of recent breakthroughs with solar technology, making the renewable energy sector increasingly efficient and cost-effective. Earlier this month, a team in Switzerland set a new efficiency record for a new type of solar cell using the miracle material perovskite. By combining it with silicon, the researchers were able to achieve efficiency levels that rival satellite-grade solar panels at a fraction of the cost. Interesting. I don't know if we had reported on perovskite here on the Bear of Bad News. Anyways, up next, Deepwater discoveries. Scientists find more than 110 new fish and invertebrate species in the Coral Sea. Marine scientists have discovered more than 110 new fish and invertebrate species in the Coral Sea, a figure they believe could exceed 200 as more are identified. The species were found in waters between 200 meters and 3 kilometers deep in the Coral Sea Marine Park, Australia's largest marine protected area, which spans nearly 1 million square kilometers to the east of the Great Barrier Reef. The new to science species, including brittle stars, crabs, sea anemones, and sponges, were collected during a 35-day voyage on the Cicero's Investigator research vessel, which set sail from Brisbane last October. It traveled as far as Mellish Reef, about 1,000 kilometers off the Queensland coast. Dr. Will White, a shark expert and the Cicero voyage chief scientist, said the expedition set out to learn about the area's deep water biodiversity, for which there was very limited data. Specimens collected on board were subsequently identified during what White believes were likely the largest taxonomic workshops of marine animals ever undertaken in Australia. White himself identified 4 new species: a skate, ray, deepwater cat shark, and chimera. The new ray species, found on the Ken Plateau about halfway between Australia and New Caledonia, was a type of stingray in the genus Urolophus. The animals were like stingrays, White said. They've got a relatively long tail, but then they've got a caudal fin at the end. The new deepwater cat shark, genus Apristorus, was a tropical species, White said. They're very dark-bodied, they're mostly flabby, truly deepwater things, very slow-moving, with lots of little teeth. Another discovery was a new chimera, also known as a ghost shark or ratfish, a type of animal related to sharks and rays which have cartilaginous rather than bony skeletons. The animals have a rat-like tail, quite a plump nose, and a big spine above the dorsal fin. Dr. Claire Rowe, the marine invertebrates collection manager at the Australian Museum, said invertebrate specialists on board the investigator photographed and took samples of the newly collected animals. She said many invertebrates, including jellyfish, were cryptic, difficult to identify based on physical characteristics alone. There does look like there's some new species of anemone, which is quite exciting, she said. Scientists were conducting further genetic testing from the tissue samples to confirm what collected specimens were new to science. Such marine expeditions were important, Rose said, because so little is known about the deep sea. It is such an unexplored area with so many threats to our ocean, such as overfishing and climate change and deep sea mining. We need to understand what's out there before it's lost. The Coral Sea is almost half a degree warmer than it was 30 or 40 years ago, climate scientists said. The sea surface temperatures there over both the last summer and calendar year have been the hottest on record. Samples from the voyage have been shared around the country and held in collections including at the Cicero, the Australian Museum, and state museums. Up next, some states are making it easier to sue gun companies. From thetrace.org. Last month, the state of New York and survivors of the 2022 mass shooting at Tops Friendly Market in Buffalo partially settled a lawsuit with a gun dealer and firearm magazine manufacturer. The shooter, a white supremacist who killed 10 black people, had used their products to carry out the massacre. As part of that settlement, the gun store shut down and agreed never to obtain a license to sell guns again, and the magazine manufacturer agreed to pay $1.75 million to survivors and victims' family members while reforming its sales and marketing practices. It was among the first times that plaintiffs in a lawsuit were able to hold weapons manufacturers and sellers accountable for dangerous business practices. Despite broad legal protections for the gun industry on the federal level, a first-in-the-nation gun industry accountability law in New York played a role in the suit. Gun industry suits, not just in New York but in other states like New Jersey, may be part of a revived consumer protection movement in the United States. States are also cracking down on tech giants, healthcare companies, and others over issues like junk fees, forever chemicals, and misleading market. Gun industry suits, not just in New York, but in other states like New Jersey, may be part of a revived consumer protection movement in the United States. States are also cracking down on tech giants, healthcare companies, and others over issues like junk fees, forever chemicals, and misleading marketing. Just last week, juries in New Mexico and California delivered landmark verdicts holding Meta and Google liable for harming young users on their platforms. Unlike most of those big players, the gun industry enjoys broad legal protections in state and federal courts. That's thanks to the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, PLCAA. For 2 decades, PLCAA has made it exceptionally difficult to bring lawsuits against gun makers and sellers. But the new state laws, like New York's, take advantage of an exception written into PLCAA. The federal law allows for some suits when gun companies violate state or federal laws applicable to the sale or marketing of firearms. New York's law, enacted in 2021, classified the improper marketing or sale of guns as a public nuisance and mandated that gun companies more carefully monitor the distribution and marketing of their guns. It required tighter security and screening during sales, stricter inventory controls to prevent theft, and policies to curb false advertising. And the kicker, violations allow for lawsuits against gun makers and sellers. New York's law has since inspired similar legislation across the country. As states are seeing more success with their laws, others are joining in. This year, lawmakers in Rhode Island are considering their own version, which, if passed, would allow lawsuits against gun makers or sellers that fail to take measures to prevent illegal acquisition or modification of their products. A similar law passed in Virginia and is awaiting action by Democratic Governor Abigail Spanberger. Virginia's bill requires reasonable controls to prevent selling a gun to somebody despite obvious indications that the buyer intended to use it for violence or was purchasing the weapon for trafficking or for someone else. It also includes inventory controls to prevent loss or theft of guns. What? They don't even have inventory laws? Okay, wait. In both cases, the laws explicitly provide avenues for civil liability, allowing victims, the state, or cities to sue gun makers or sellers if the requirements aren't met. The sponsors of Rhode Island's legislation, State Representative Susan Donovan and State Senator Pamela Lauria, told me that their primary goal is to incentivize the gun industry to be more careful and save lives. The bad actors are the ones responsible for most of the guns that are used illegally, Donovan, a Democrat, said. So if we could eliminate the bad actors, then perhaps we could save some lives. I wonder if you can eliminate bad actors or if they just maybe will become smarter. Donovan and Lauria's legislative push comes after back-to-back mass shootings in Rhode Island at Brown University in Providence in December and at a youth hockey game last month in Pawtucket. The attacks shook a state that has rarely experienced mass shootings and has low rates of gun violence otherwise. Both legislators had personal connections to the Brown shooting. Lauria's niece is a student there, and they were together when the shooting happened. Donovan's son and grandson had been in the same university building at the same time just a week earlier for a science Olympiad. Donovan had no connection to that. That is completely random and has no connection to the same thing. We've always just kind of been waiting for it to happen, Loria said, and unfortunately, in rapid succession, Rhode Island has experienced this kind of violence up close. That's why Representative Donovan and I have both been fighting for gun reform for a long time, but this brings a new salience for Rhode Island. If Rhode Island lawmakers pass their version and Virginia's governor signs the state's bill, they would be the 11th and 12th states to enact gun-specific public nuisance laws. At least 3 other states, Arizona, Massachusetts, and Vermont, are considering similar legislation. Rhode Island seems kind of entitled. Up next, Transmasc Ironman team wins 3rd place for trans people and beyond. At the 2026 Athletic Brewing Ironman 70.3 Oceanside competition held on Saturday, March 28th in Oceanside, California, more than 3,000 age group athletes and more than 60 professional athletes competed alongside 3 incredible Transmasc athletes. Transgender trailblazer and 3-time Ivy League champion swimmer Schuler Bailar, 29, disabled trans non-binary bicyclist and one of Out's most eligible bachelors for 2024 Chella Mann, 27, and trans non-binary marathoner Cal Calamia, 29, the only one of these 3 to have competed in an Ironman before Saturday's event. Together they formed Team Iron Transmasc, and their hard work paid off. They finished 3rd in the men's division ahead of 80 other relay teams for cisgender men aged 25 to 29. Yeah, we kind of crushed it, California told Out after the event. Chelia was a little more like, all right, let's just kind of see what happens. But Schuler and I are very competitive, so we were sort of tracking the leaderboard and seeing what was possible. They also found something to laugh about along the way, as they moved through what Ironman calls the area between the 3 kinds of triathlete competition. We were cracking up about the transition zone being there, done that, they said. We were cracking up about the transition zone. Been there, done that, they said. Finally, it all came down to Calamia. Running the 3rd leg in the Ironman relay after Bailar swam the Pacific Ocean course, and Mann, who is deaf, competed the cycling portion, with their cochlear implants turned off. Chella pushed themselves further than ever before to make this happen, said Calamia, but all of us pushed ourselves as much as we could. There was a runner that was also competing in the relay that I passed at the very, very end of the whole thing within the last 10 meters, they said. I had to close the deal. There was no part of me that would quit, and we got a spot on the men's podium. It was amazing. After receiving their finisher medals and posing for photographs, the trio took time to celebrate their victory. We were just playing, splashing in the ocean, doing cartwheels, piggyback rides. Calamia said, I generally haven't felt this amazing in a very long time. I felt my inner child just explode out of me. They added that they benefited from undoubtedly having the biggest support crew of any relay team competing, and each member of They added that they benefited from undoubtedly having the biggest support crew of any relay team competing, and each member of Team Iron Transmasc wore something to declare their identity to spectators. I had a trans flag on my running shorts, they said. Schuler had trans-colored goggles, and Chella had a cycling suit on that said, bodies are not bands. We felt like we were fighting for something bigger than ourselves. The Ironman event was held just days after the decision by the International Olympic Committee to ban transgender women from competition, starting with the 2028 Summer Games in Los Angeles, as the Advocate reported. That decision was devastating to Bailar for multiple reasons. One of the reasons that the recent IOC decision is so devastating is because it sends a message that sports are going to lead through discrimination, as opposed to being on a progressive way of moving humanity forward, which is what they should be doing, Bailar said Thursday prior to the Ironman competition. This concept of trans athletes being the singular thing that threatens fairness in sports is predicated upon the false conception that there currently exists fairness in sports, he added. We have massive disparities in sports that are largely due to systemic oppression, the same oppression that oppresses trans people, patriarchy, misogyny, classism, and socioeconomic disparity, racism being a huge factor as well. And if we put all these things together and we consider what does fairness actually look like, now we can recognize that we don't actually have a level playing field. Baylor also noted that other than Laurel Hubbard, there's never been a trans woman Olympian, and never mind one who medaled. Can anybody even name any trans women who competed in the women's category? And if you can name more than one, you are literally making shit up, he said. While there are about 24 trans women nationally or international champions, most people can't actually name any. Up next, the Ecuadorian Amazon reduces noise in its rivers with solar boats and innovative acoustic measurements. From noticiasambientales.com, in the Achuar territory in the Ecuadorian Amazon, scientists and indigenous communities are driving a key change. The replacement of combustion engines with solar boats is beginning to transform the soundscape. In this regard, the noise that dominated the rivers for decades is starting to dissipate. Thus, the ecosystems are gradually regaining their natural conditions. Moreover, this transition not only involves technological innovation, it also represents a new way of understanding the relationship between transportation, culture, and biodiversity. An innovative metric to measure impact. To evaluate these changes, specialists apply the Acoustic River Index. This tool allows measuring acoustic pollution in river environments. In this way, soundscapes become scientific data. Consequently, it is possible to monitor how the health of ecosystems evolves. The first results are compelling. Solar boats generate an acoustic disturbance up to 5 times lower than gasoline engines. On the other hand, the initiative is led by Cara Solar, along with the National Institute of Biodiversity. This alliance combines local knowledge and applied science. Biodiversity and recovery of the soundscape. Sound is an essential component in the jungle. Many species depend on it to orient themselves, communicate, and reproduce. However, combustion engines disrupt this balance. They emit frequencies close to 2900 Hz that interfere with natural signals. Therefore, the reduction of noise favors ecological recovery. As acoustic pollution decreases, vital processes for fauna are restored. Likewise, this advancement allows for a better understanding of the dynamics of rivers. Listening to nature becomes a tool for environmental diagnosis. Advantages of solar boats. Solar boats offer multiple environmental benefits. First, they significantly reduce acoustic pollution in rivers. Additionally, they eliminate direct emissions of pollutant gases. This helps mitigate the impact of transportation on sensitive ecosystems. On the other hand, they decrease the risk of fuel spills. Consequently, the water quality and aquatic life are protected. Moreover, they represent a substantial alternative for local communities. Their use strengthens regional economies without compromising the natural environment. Finally, their implementation promotes more balanced development models. Technology and conservation are integrated into a single strategy. Science communities and a sustainable future. The use of the Acoustic River Index marks an advancement in environmental monitoring. It allows for precise measurement of the benefits of clean technology. In parallel, the participation of the Achuar communities is fundamental. Their knowledge of the territory enriches the scientific research. In this way, a collaborative approach is built. Conservation ceases to be external and is integrated into everyday life. In conclusion, the Ecuadorian Amazon positions itself as a living laboratory. There, technological innovation and ancestral wisdom converge to protect one of the most biodiverse ecosystems on the planet. Up next, decades after poaching drove them extinct, rhinos are back in the wild in Uganda. 43 years after the last free-ranging rhinos were seen in the country, the Uganda Wildlife Authority has welcomed 4 southern rhinos to Kidepo Valley National Park in the country's north from a breeding sanctuary designed for the species' reintroduction. We're glad and privileged to be taking back rhinos, much as it is a different subspecies from that used to exist, because the northern white rhino is the one which used to exist there, but was hunted to extinction, UWA Executive Director James Musinguzi said at the Ziwa Sanctuary on March 17th. According to the Wildlife Authority, a total of 8 rhinos will be released in the park by May this year, marking the beginning of a longer process aimed at establishing a viable free-ranging rhino population in Kidepo Valley National Park. Uganda was once home to around 300 northern white rhinos and 400 eastern black rhinos, but these populations were devastated by intense poaching that flourished amid the civil war that began in the late 1970s. The last of the country's wild rhinos was killed in 1983. In 2005, a breeding program for rhinos was established at Ziwa Rhino Sanctuary. 6 southern white rhinos, 4 from Kenya and 2 from a sanctuary in the U.S., were introduced the following year. And by 2023, that herd had grown to 42, according to the sanctuary's website. Bashir Hangi, UWA's head of communications, told Mangabe that 4 rhinos have been translocated from Ziwa to Kidepo so far, with 4 more to follow. In January, 4 southern white rhinos from the sanctuary were translocated to Ajai Wildlife Reserve in the West Nile region. The decision to establish rhinos in these protected areas is anchored in Uganda's National Rhino Conservation Strategy and follows a feasibility assessment undertaken by UWA. The authority says it hopes the animals' reintroduction will help restore ecological integrity and contribute to national conservation objectives. In addition to creating an additional conservation stronghold for rhinos, Hangi told Mangabe their presence will also support the local economy through increased tourism and conservation-related opportunities. Robert Arujo, a veterinary specialist who attended UWA's rhino conservation program from 2013 to 2020, agreed that having rhinos at this national park will attract visitors and enhance its conservation value. Ecologically, the white rhinos are grazers, and their large food intake keeps the grasslands in check, he told Mangabe in an interview. He cautioned there are also potential difficulties, including managing the white rhino's health, possible human-wildlife conflict with surrounding communities, and the high costs of protecting the rhinos against poachers. But he said rhinos conservation raises the stakes and effort of a park management, which in turn helps the protection of other species. The translocation helps us not keep all eggs in one basket and create opportunities to mitigate all of the above risks. Hangi said the Wildlife Authority has prepared carefully for the translocations. This was a deliberate program with extensive planning undertaken, which included habitat preparation, enhanced security, and veterinary protocols put in place in addition to community engagement. All right, and lastly, we have a South African politician goes snorkeling in a giant pothole to highlight city management failures. A 75-year-old woman running for mayor of South Africa's biggest city went snorkeling in a large water-filled trench in a suburban road in a stunt to draw attention to what she describes as years of mismanagement by the city's authorities. Helen Zille, I hope I'm saying that right, she deserves it, a well-known South African politician, wore a wetsuit, a mask, and a snorkel, and a pink and white swimming cap as she doggy-paddled through the pool of muddy brown water in an upscale Johannesburg suburb. The pool has been there for about 3 years because of a burst water pipe hadn't been fixed properly despite repeated attempts, she said. Zilla posted a video of herself in the trench that was picked up and broadcast by television news channels. In it, she says sarcastically, "And here we are with a free and wonderful Saturday afternoon snorkel. I wonder if there are any fishes in here. Let me take a look," she added before dipping part of her head under the water. Residents in the city of around 6 million people often face water and electricity cuts and broken infrastructure. Residents in the city of around 6 million people often face water and electricity cuts and broken infrastructure like burst water pipes and damaged roads. Zilla, who was previously leader of South Africa's second biggest party and mayor of the city of Cape Town, said she'll stand in local elections for mayor of Johannesburg. The current mayor of Johannesburg said in a post on X on Tuesday that the pothole was the result of a pipe that had repeatedly failed over the past 3 years, and it was fixed and the hole was filled in a day after Zilla's stunt on Saturday. Interesting. And that is the end of this week's articles. Hopefully they added a little positive joy to your life. Before we end, I have our final segment of the show, something I like to call A Tale of Two Paragraphs. In this segment, I take the first and last paragraph from an article on Substack or another similar source and read them to you, to encourage you to go read the article yourself. Many people forget the power of the written word to move us and how intriguing the middle of the story is. The less I read, the better, but people often want to know how we got to endings more than the endings themselves, and maybe then you will go exploring the Substack and read the paragraphs in between. This podcast article is from Dave Barry's Substack entitled The Rock Bottom Remainers in Omaha and comes from davebarry.substack.com. The situation was this. The city of Omaha, Nebraska had finally finished work on a spectacular, brand new, state of the art, $158 million library building, and the folks who made it happen wanted to throw a big grand opening bash. So they needed a band. There were many performers they could have invited: the Rolling Stones, Taylor Swift, Bad Bunny, Wayne Newton, Wayne Fontana, and the Mindbenders, Reformed Bunny, Cher, and the late Jimi Hendrix are just a few of the many names I could type in this sentence. But Omaha did not want just any band. Omaha wanted a band whose members met certain strict musical requirements, specifically that they had some connection with the libraries and they did not expect to be paid. And so Omaha chose the Rock Bottom Remainders. A few paragraphs in between and an ending of: Greg was a great writer and an excellent musician. Way too good for the likes of us, though he loved being in the Remainders. He was also a really, really good guy. We miss him a lot. Towards the end of the Omaha show, we did a little tribute to him, and we invited his widow, Carolyn Hungerford, to join us on stage so we could serenade her with, of course, Sweet Caroline. So that was nice. In fact, the whole Omaha experience, aside from Amy having her underwear ransacked by the TSA, was great. We thanked the library folks for inviting us and for their wonderful hospitality, and above all, for the open bar. Also, we promised not to quit our day jobs. We hope you enjoyed our show, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. And until next time, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, so I won't. Have a good day.